In the dynamic advertising space, evolution parallels, if not surpasses, that of entertainment. To speak to this, we have Rori Floyd, SVP of Global Business Affairs, and Mark Egmon, VP of Marketing and Business Development at the Team Companies, which is a part of Cast & Crew's advertising and live entertainment division. All right, hello guys.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome to my show. So both of you have worked in commercial production, ad agencies, and now here at Cast & Crew. Rori, your role in leading such a large business affairs team. Mark, you heading up our marketing and business development team, puts both of you in the front lines dealing with corporate advertisers and agencies as they transform. So tell me, what is trending now, and what are some of the bigger challenges you see facing the industry today?
I would say that one of the main trends is AI. And how and whether or not it can be used in commercial advertising. So when you're creating commercials, are you using real people, voiceovers, or are you using AI generated voices? As we all know, that was the catalyst for the strike that occurred between WGA and SAG-AFTRA, determining what fair compensation would be for these individuals as they're being utilized. I think that from a contracting talent payment perspective, that as long as there's contracting, that's covered. But in other spaces, there could be some ambiguity about what you're able to do with that particular content. I think Mark can speak a bit more about the challenges that we're experiencing.
Right. What I'm seeing is actually challenges throughout the entire marketing ecosystem. You have, just at the base level, there's so much production going offshore right now. So that's impacting, the average worker, whether it's a crew member or an actor, and then it ripples all the way into support businesses, the caterers, the equipment rental houses, payroll. And with so many marketers also choosing, just for cost reasons and more control, producing in-house or leaning more heavily on what we'll call conglomerate in-house, which is owned essentially by the holding companies of ad agencies, and they have a centralized production arm. This really puts a lot of pressure on independent commercial producers and production houses, creative editorial houses, et cetera. And then at the marketer level, especially when you're dealing with global advertisers, they're having a big challenge in managing their licensed element rights, their talent rights, because so much content is being created, so much is being sent, all over the world in so many different mediums. It's very hard to keep track. And so that's really what you're seeing in challenges, like I said, throughout the entire marketing ecosystem, supply chain.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts to this. So why has rights management gotten so out of control?
Well, I think, first of all, there's so much more content being produced. And then advertisers have gone from an agency of record or two agencies of record who had all the full business construct within their organization to manage content and how it was produced. Then they went to a roster of agencies, and just for the creative freedom and the ability to create more content and have different perspectives. Now they've gone to a whole cadre of creative partners. Many of those partners don't have the internal business construct to really manage these rights correctly. A lot of producers are a lot greener because you just have so much more content being created by people who haven't necessarily been trained and come up in the business. And then you have a devaluation of business affairs, which is the main organization, as Rori can speak to, that is really at the forefront of really managing rights, taking care of the licensed elements, the talent, et cetera. So with that, it really all comes together and sort of creates quite a mess when an advertiser is trying to manage the rights.
Exactly. And so the devaluation of business affairs, can you speak a little bit more to that, and what does that mean?
I would say that, in traditional advertising, before we had all of these other types of content being created, you had an agency, as Mark mentioned, you had an agency that managed all of those details. But I think as advertisers are looking to save money in some regards, they're outsourcing a lot of these services to create the content but there aren't players in place to make sure that they're mitigating risk. And so advertisers are finding themselves in a position where there's no real protection. They're creating tons of content, but no one's paying attention to the rights. And if there are going to be any budget cuts, usually it's those departments that are impacted the most. But understanding that you can't get your content on air without these players. So I think that that's where we're seeing the devaluation, but the need is still there.
Yeah, well, I would think that this impacts your team.
Oh, for sure, for sure. We're so much more busier. We also are saying we find ourselves stepping in to support advertisers and agencies when there's unauthorized usage of content. It could be talent, it could be fonts, it could be stock images, anything that's outside of its term of use. And the advertiser has to address these additional payments that need to be made to these individuals or these entities that are featured in their commercial content. We find that we're spending a lot of time on process, introducing process in places where there's never been process before, and covering off on things that I think the advertiser assumed was covered in their production agency's staff support. So we've just seen ourselves really gaining a great deal of understanding about how to mitigate risk, how to step in to help the clients to ensure that they're not paying for use outside of terms more often than not.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you're really providing a service to our clients that's of real value to them. As they don't do that no longer in-house, that is something now that your team does. And quite well, I might add.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. But Mark, so you're engaged in all types of major advertisers and many in-house agencies as well, like we talked about earlier. How are you seeing this shift in the BA model? Do you see it similarly?
Well, I do, and I think what you're seeing is when we talk about challenges and struggles, you're seeing the struggle of the advertiser trying to figure out where this fits. They still need the service. They probably didn't realize how much they needed the service until they started to bring things in-house. Likewise, the ad agencies, as Rori spoke to earlier, it's not a major profit center for them when the creative is, the production is. And so they're looking at their bottom line and thinking, well, how can we cut this out of the equation and maybe outsource it? So a lot of models are at play.
Yeah.
And, it's like a snowflake. Every time you're dealing with a new advertiser or a new agency, you're trying to figure out where they kind of fall in the entire spectrum of their ability to manage business affairs. And then with that, as Rori just mentioned, there's so much in process that you work on and establishing a process, and you have to have that level of expertise and that to come in. And one thing that I've especially noticed is there's always people out there with technology solutions, and technology really enables it. It's so important, as you know, and as you know, it's so important to really support the business part of what Rori and her team do. But a lot of times people try to leapfrog and put the technology first, and that's when you see it sort of fail. They don't have the experts, they don't have the process, but they have the tool.
Right. Really well said. Thank you, both of you, for talking to us and talking about this today. This is really a fascinating world and a changing landscape, but it seems like both of you are at the forefront of that, which is just fantastic.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Thanks.